In 1898, the Mohegan faced the unforgiving rocks of Cornwall's coastline and met a catastrophic end. What events led to this tragic night, sealing the fate of over 100 souls? And what was one intriguing theory regarding the ship's compasses that could have drawn all aboard to disaster? Come aboard and find out as we step back into that time-lost Victorian world. Ahoy! It's Lorelei of the Shipwreck Sirens here, anchoring you in the tumultuous waters of maritime tragedy and voyages of the doomed. We hope to capture your imagination in our narrated docudramas, blending the known facts with dramatized speculative dialogue and actions based on the often scant accounts of the survivors. We seek to honor all who did and did not survive. The terror of peril upon the sea. It was a cool, crisp day on October 13, 1898, as the mighty Mohegan ploughed through the Atlantic waters. The steamer was a majestic sight, 8,500 tons of metal and engineering prowess, owned by the American Atlantic Transport Company. On its second voyage from Tilbury to New York, the ship carried 158 souls. A mix of 56 passengers, 96 crew members, and 6 cattlemen tasked with handling livestock on the return trip. In addition to the passengers and crew, the Mohegan carried a range of cargo, including hides from India, church ornaments, flowers, lead, and antimony. The passengers were a diverse group of families, eager for a new beginning, seasoned travelers and merchants. Some stood on the deck, taking in the endless horizon, while others enjoyed the comforts of the elegant cabins below, unaware that fate had already started to conspire against them. In the captain's cabin, skipper Richard Griffith sat behind his desk, studying the charts spread before him. His years of experience told him they were making good time. The Mohegan was cruising at a steady 14 knots, having passed Eddystone Light at 4 p.m. without incident. The sea was calm, and the wind, though brisk, was favourable. Griffith, a man known for his meticulous attention to detail and cautious optimism, kept his gaze sharp. He was not one to take the sea's calmness at face value. His confidence, however, was tempered by years of experience navigating these waters. The Manacles had claimed countless ships before, and Griffith knew the sea could be deceivingly calm, masking the dangers that lurked below. But the ocean, as many a sailor knew, had a way of turning the tables when least expected. He rose from his desk, stretching his legs as he recalled the numerous voyages he had commanded. He was proud of his ship and crew, and this crossing seemed like another feather in his cap, until it wasn't. "Captain, weather's holding steady," said the first officer, knocking lightly on the cabin door. No signs of trouble. The man was a reliable officer, trusted by Griffith and well liked by the crew. He had navigated these waters many times before, and though the area around the Lizard Peninsula was known to be treacherous, they had no reason to worry on such a calm evening. Griffith nodded, rising from his seat. "Good. Keep her on course. I'll be on deck shortly." As he made his way out, he glanced at the clock. It was nearing 7 p.m. Soon, the sun would sink beneath the horizon, leaving them to navigate in the twilight. The orange glow of the setting sun cast long shadows across the ship, painting the deck in warm light. an ironic contrast to the cold danger that lay ahead. Below deck, the passengers enjoyed a peaceful evening, unaware of the danger that lurked. Among them was Mrs. Eleanor Wright, a widow in her 50s, who was returning to New York after visiting family in England. She sat near a window in the dining room, watching the sunset. Beside her, a young couple, James and Clara Morton, chatted about their future in America, their voices lit with excitement. "I can't wait to see New York," Clara said, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Imagine the opportunities." Around them, stewards moved gracefully, serving meals and tending to the passengers' needs. The ship hummed with activity, the calm efficiency of the crew giving the passengers a sense of security. James smiled, squeezing her hand. "Soon, Clara. We are almost there. Just a few more days." The couple's excitement was contagious, and even the older passengers found themselves caught up in their enthusiasm. In the cabin next to them, a traveling businessman from Liverpool wrote in his journal, recounting his day's events. Little did they know their conversations, plans and dreams would soon be cut short by a force far beyond their control. The mood on board was one of optimism, but the sea was already preparing to show its darker side, a side that would spare few. On the bridge, Captain Griffith joined his officers at the helm. He scanned the horizon, his sharp eyes watching for any sign of danger. The rocks of the Lizard Peninsula, especially the infamous Manacles reef, were close now, dangerously close. "Keep a close watch," Griffith ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We don't want any surprises tonight." The officers nodded, their faces serious. They knew the reputation of these waters. The Manacles had claimed many ships over the years. And though the night was calm, the sea was unforgiving. Even the slightest navigational error could be fatal. The officers exchanged a few quiet words, each aware of their responsibilities in these perilous waters. But it was already too late. Unknown to the crew, the ship had already veered off course, its path leading it straight toward disaster. Perhaps it was a fault in the compass. Perhaps human error. No one would ever know for sure. As the Mohegan steamed ahead, its passengers and crew blissfully unaware, the jagged rocks of the Manacles loomed ever closer. The sea, indifferent to human life, awaited its next victim. Disaster came not with a sound of warning, but with a rumble that seemed to erupt from the depths of the earth itself. The Mohegan lurched as it struck the rocks, the grinding impact sending shudders through its hull. Metal groaned and twisted under the strain, the sound of splintering wood and tearing steel carrying into the night as the ship's structure gave way to the unforgiving reef. Those closest to the collision drowned instantly. The peaceful night was suddenly a carnival of chaos and destruction. The impact ripped a massive hole into the starboard hull, and within 10 minutes, water was rapidly pouring in, submerging the liner below the surface. As the Mohegan collided with the rocks, the ship's electrical systems failed, plunging it into total darkness. The sudden loss of power added to the panic, leaving passengers and crew in confusion as they struggled to navigate through the chaos. Without communication between decks and with no visibility, scores were left stranded below, unaware of the full extent of the disaster unfolding above. In the face of it all, Captain Griffith had already leapt into action. He knew the ship was in grave danger, but his immediate concern was to save as many lives as possible. "Abandon ship!" he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. But with the water rising at an alarming rate, time was running out. Griffith's heart raced as he barked orders. "Sound the alarm! Launch the distress signals! Get everyone to the lifeboats! Now!" The once orderly ship descended into chaos as passengers scrambled for safety. Screams filled the air, and the ship tilted violently as water poured in. Mrs. Wright clutched her chair as dishes and cutlery crashed to the floor around her. The young couple, James and Clara Morton, were thrown from their seats, landing hard on the wooden planks. Their dreams of a new life in America seemingly dashed in that horrifying instant. Among the passengers, there were those who sat in stunned disbelief, frozen in their seats as chaos erupted around them. One man in shock continued sipping his tea as though refusing to believe the unfolding catastrophe. Passengers desperately tried to make their way to the deck, but the narrow corridors were quickly filling with seawater, trapping a host of people below. Children wailed as parents tried to comfort them, even as they themselves struggled to process the reality of the situation. As the ship continued to list, one of the lifeboats was lowered into the frigid waters below. But in the chaos, several passengers fell overboard before they could even climb aboard. The freezing Atlantic bit at their skin, and those who managed to stay afloat clung to debris, their hopes of rescue growing dimmer with each passing second. For those left behind on the ship, the sight of the lifeboats filling up was a devastating reminder that time was running out. Down in the lower decks, the situation was even more dire. Crew members frantically banged on doors, trying to wake passengers trapped in their cabins. One of them, a 19-year-old deckhand named Thomas, kicked open a door and found an elderly man struggling to put on a life jacket. Thomas had been raised by a fisherman father, learning from a youthful age that survival at sea required quick thinking and bravery. This training kicked in now, pushing aside the fear threatening to paralyze him as the ship began to sink. "Come on, sir," Thomas yelled, grabbing the man's arm. "We've got to get out of here." The elderly man, disoriented and terrified, looked up at him with wide eyes, his hands shaking. I can't swim," he stammered, his voice trembling with fear as the freezing water began to rise around his ankles. "You don't have to swim," Thomas replied, pulling him toward the deck. "Just hold on tight. I won't let you go." The young deckhand's voice was steady, despite the chaos around him. He knew that time was running out, and he was not about to leave anyone behind. Together, they fought their way through the rising waters, dodging debris and other panicked passengers. The icy water numbed their legs, but they pressed on, determined to survive. As they reached the deck, Thomas saw the chaos unfolding around him. Lifeboats were being lowered into the sea, but most were already full. He looked back at the elderly man beside him, then at the freezing water below. There was no other choice. "Hold your breath," he shouted, before jumping over the side, dragging the man with him into the cold Atlantic waters. The shock of the icy water hit them both hard, but Thomas held on, kicking furiously to keep them afloat. Around them, other passengers thrashed in the water, clinging to debris and lifeboats in a desperate attempt to survive. The sea swirled violently, its icy grip tightening around those in the water as the ship groaned, sinking deeper. The roar of the sea drowned out the screams as the Mohegan slipped further beneath the waves, taking a volume of souls with her. Meanwhile, Captain Griffith remained at the helm, watching as his ship slipped further beneath the waves. His officers had urged him to abandon ship, but he had refused. "A captain goes down with his ship," he had said, his voice calm and resolute. And so he stayed, even as the Mohegan sank into the dark waters. The sea was merciless, swallowing the great steamer in a matter of minutes. The once mighty vessel, now a twisted, broken wreck, lay silent at the bottom of the ocean. Griffith, a man of honor, had chosen his fate. His final act of bravery would be remembered, but the toll of human life was far greater than anyone had imagined. By the next morning, October 14th, the full extent of the disaster became clear. Lifeboats from Falmouth and nearby villages scoured the coastline, searching for survivors. Rescue teams pulled 56 bodies from the water, their faces pale and lifeless. Among the dead were Captain Griffith and all his officers, who had chosen to stay with the ship until the very end. The sight of the bodies being pulled from the water was a grim reminder of the night's horrors. The survivors, those fortunate enough to make it to the lifeboats, sat huddled together, their eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The nightmare was over, but the memories would haunt them for the rest of their lives. In all, only 52 people survived the wreck. 38 crew members and 14 passengers. Those who made it ashore were found clinging to debris or huddled in lifeboats, their bodies frozen from the cold, their minds numb with shock. Among the survivors was Thomas, the young deckhand who had saved the elderly man. They had both been pulled from the water by a passing lifeboat, barely alive but alive nonetheless. The elderly man, shivering uncontrollably, turned to Thomas with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, son," he whispered weakly as they were pulled aboard. "You saved my life." Thomas had only nodded, too exhausted to speak. The weight of what had just occurred was too much to process. The cause of the wreck remains a mystery. A Board of Trade inquiry convened in November to investigate the disaster, but no clear explanation was found. One theory, however, was particularly compelling. Though the technology of the day was primitive compared to modern standards, it was known that geological phenomena could cause catastrophic miscalculations. It was speculated that the ship's compasses had been affected by the powerful magnetic forces of the local iron deposits found in the seabed near the Cornish coast. If this were the case, it would be as if the very earth turned against the hapless travelers aboard the liner that night. This theory provided some explanation of unexplained deviation from its course, but others believed that the crew had simply miscalculated, steering too close to the dangerous coastline. What was certain, however, was the sheer scale of the tragedy. The Mohegan had been one of the most modern ships of its time, built just 2 years earlier in Hull, and considered one of the safest vessels afloat. Its sudden demise sent shockwaves through the maritime community. The families of those lost were left with questions, but few answers. For the families of the 102 people who perished, the loss was unbearable. Many of the bodies recovered were buried in the local cemetery at St. Keverne, Cornwall. The survivors, though spared, carried the weight of that fateful night with them for the rest of their lives. They were haunted by the screams, the cold, and the endless darkness of the Atlantic that had taken so many. For Thomas, the young deckhand, the memory of that night would never fade. He had saved a life, but he had also witnessed unimaginable loss. The legacy of the Mohegan remains a haunting reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the ocean's surface. For those who travel these waters, the story of the Mohegan serves as a solemn warning, a testament to the power of the sea and the fragile nature of life aboard even the strongest of ships. Captain Richard Griffith, a man of honor, went down with his ship, his name forever etched in the annals of maritime history. The tragedy of the catastrophe will never be forgotten. A dark chapter in the history of Cornwall's treacherous coast. And so we close another tragedy at sea, where all those lost souls will share the same epitaph for all eternity. The sea is my grave. My grave is the sea. Thank you for watching. If you would enjoy more dramatized retellings, please be sure to rate, like, and subscribe so that we may bring you more harrowing tales of the sea.